The world of high art is often seen as a world of privilege, exclusivity, and perfection, but within the shadows of this glamorous industry lies a far darker side, one of deception, greed, and manipulation. On a quiet evening in late autumn, when the last visitors had left the prestigious Ridgewell Museum of Fine Art in downtown New York City, the unimaginable took place. It was a crime so perfectly executed that, even in the aftermath, authorities struggled to make sense of what had occurred. The Ridgewell Museum, home to some of the most iconic pieces of art in the world, had long been a haven for collectors and curators alike. Its reputation for securing some of the rarest and most valuable works of art was unparalleled. The collection included masterpieces by renowned artists such as Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and Monet. But it was the unveiling of a new, exclusive exhibit, the masterpieces of the Renaissance, that would become the setting for one of the most audacious heists in history. On the evening of November 12, 2024, the museum had just finished its most successful day of the year. The museum had hosted an intimate gala for high-profile art collectors and critics, celebrating the opening of the Renaissance exhibit. The new exhibit was said to contain some of the most valuable and never-before-seen pieces from the era, works that, according to experts, could fetch up to $100 million on the black market. The star of the show was an unknown portrait by Leonardo da Vinci, titled La Luz, believed to be one of his lost works. This painting alone was valued at $40 million. As the evening came to a close, the museum's staff began their nightly routine, the gallery lights dimmed, the last of the guests left, and the security team went about its usual rounds. The museum, normally equipped with the latest in security systems, had also employed a state-of-the-art surveillance network, each corner of the museum watched over by an array of cameras, motion detectors, and infrared sensors. It was considered nearly impossible to breach, especially given the layers of security surrounding the most valuable pieces. The head of security, Frank Wallace, a seasoned veteran with 30 years of experience, was confident in his team's ability to protect the priceless collection. Wallace had seen it all: smash and grabs, insider threats, even attempted cyber thefts, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to unfold. At precisely 11:45 p.m., the museum's security system was breached. A quiet, calculated intrusion into the museum's electrical grid caused the cameras to flicker and shut down for a split second. This brief, temporary blackout, lasting no more than 2 minutes, would be the first and only mistake made by the perpetrators. The intruders knew exactly what they were doing. As the lights went out and the cameras failed, the thieves moved with military precision, bypassing the physical locks and entry points. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a carefully orchestrated performance. While the security team scrambled to investigate the malfunction, the criminals were already inside the museum. Frank Wallace, still unaware of the gravity of the situation, continued his rounds. But something felt off. He had received a routine alert on his phone indicating that all systems had been temporarily disabled. The timing of the blackout was strange, as it had never occurred before during his tenure. He decided to check the security feeds personally and called his team to make sure everything was in order. That's when it happened. The first sign that something was wrong came when Frank reached the main hallway, where the most expensive pieces of the Renaissance exhibit were displayed. The room, usually filled with the soft hum of security equipment, was eerily silent. It was then that he noticed the empty pedestal where La Luz had been displayed. The infamous Da Vinci portrait was gone. His heart dropped. Frank immediately rushed to the nearby security desk, only to discover that the system was down, every single camera feed was black. He could see nothing. Panic began to set in as he realized that the heist was no longer just a possibility, it had already happened. Within minutes, Frank contacted the authorities. The NYPD's Art Theft Division, led by Detective Rachel Morales, was swiftly dispatched to the scene. By the time they arrived, the museum was in a state of chaotic disarray. Security personnel were frantically checking every door and window, all while trying to account for the other missing pieces from the exhibit. Detective Morales, a 15-year veteran of the Art Theft Division, immediately took control of the scene. She knew that in art theft cases, time was always against them. With such valuable pieces gone, it was only a matter of time before the criminals would attempt to sell the stolen artwork on the black market. Every second counted. "Where's the rest of the staff?" she asked, scanning the room. "They're upstairs, searching the offices and vaults," Frank answered, his voice filled with disbelief. Rachel didn't waste a second. "Get them down here. We need a full sweep, and I need a list of every piece that's missing. Make sure no one leaves the building until we know exactly what's happened." As the staff scrambled to secure the museum and comply with her orders, Rachel focused on the crime scene. The absence of forced entry was immediately evident. There were no broken windows, no shattered glass, no signs of struggle. It was as if the art had simply disappeared. The security grid, while momentarily disabled, had no sign of tampering after the blackout. It was as though the criminals had known exactly when the window would open, and that's when they struck. Detective Morales' first instinct was to look for a pattern. The thieves had been meticulous. They hadn't just taken the Da Vinci portrait. In fact, several other works had been stolen, some of which were even more valuable. A painting by Michelangelo, The Last Judgment, valued at $30 million, was gone, along with a rare Caravaggio piece worth $15 million. Each of these works had been displayed in high-security rooms, where the museum's top-of-the-line systems were designed to deter even the most sophisticated criminals. Yet the thieves had bypassed it all with eerie calm. The only explanation, as Rachel considered the evidence, was that the perpetrators had been inside the museum before. They had planned this for months, if not longer. But who would be capable of such a flawless operation? Rachel knew the answer wasn't going to come easy. The suspects could be anyone from well-funded international criminal syndicates to insider thieves who had been working within the museum for years. And with no security footage, no witnesses, and no obvious clues to go on, the case was proving to be one of the most challenging she'd ever faced. But one thing was certain: the $100 million art heist was only the beginning of a complex and high-stakes investigation, one that would reveal secrets hidden within the museum's walls and possibly betray the very people tasked with safeguarding the world's greatest treasures. As the investigation unfolded, Detective Morales would have to confront a maze of deception, corruption, and betrayal. And somewhere in the tangled web of lies and secrets, the perfect robbery was waiting to be solved. The Ridgewell Museum heist, a crime so well executed it defied belief, sent shockwaves through the art world. For Detective Rachel Morales, the case quickly became a race against time, each moment bringing her closer to the conclusion that would define her career. What she knew so far was unsettling. The criminals had not just stolen priceless works of art, but had done so in a way that left no trace, no clear motive, and no identifiable suspects. They had turned the museum's security systems against themselves, exposing vulnerabilities no one had even considered. And, in doing so, they had turned the world of art theft into a game with new, dangerous rules. As the days passed, Rachel and her team scrambled for leads. Their first task was to compile an exhaustive list of the missing artwork. In total, the stolen pieces were valued at $100 million, a sum so staggering it left the police department reeling. The missing works included the Da Vinci portrait La Luz, Michelangelo's The Last Judgment, Caravaggio's Judith beheading holophons, and several lesser-known but valuable pieces. The criminals had been highly selective, taking only the most historically significant and expensive works, leaving behind dozens of others that were just as valuable in their own right. Rachel knew that art thefts were often carried out by syndicates with a global reach, and her first instinct was to turn to the black market. Within days, she and her team started reaching out to art dealers and auction houses known for dealing in rare and stolen works. But, much to their frustration, there was nothing. The stolen pieces hadn't shown up anywhere on the radar of known criminals. As she sifted through the mounting pile of information, something about the nature of the heist started to gnaw at Rachel. It wasn't just the stolen artwork itself, it was the way the thieves had acted. The lack of violence, the absence of an obvious entry point, the precision in which they had taken only the highest value pieces, it all pointed to one thing: the criminals had been experts, and they had an intimate knowledge of the museum. Rachel's first lead came from a surprising source: a routine background check on the museum's employees. Among the staff was a man named Alan Reeves, a former museum technician who had worked at Ridgewell for over a decade before being let go a few months prior for a string of minor infractions. His departure had been quiet, with no apparent issues, but his sudden termination had left a number of staff members confused. Why had he been fired so suddenly? Reeves, it turned out, had maintained close relationships with several museum insiders, including some of the high-profile curators. He also had a background in art restoration, giving him the skills necessary to understand the museum's most delicate and valuable pieces. When Rachel's team dug deeper into his financial records, they discovered several unreported transactions with foreign banks, some of which had ties to international criminal organizations. But even as Reeves emerged as a prime suspect, something didn't sit right with Rachel. Reeves had no criminal record, and there was no direct evidence linking him to the heist. He was a wild card, but Rachel didn't think he was the mastermind. There was something larger at play here, and Alan Reeves was just one piece of the puzzle. The next breakthrough came when Rachel received a call from an anonymous informant who claimed to know the details of the heist. The caller, who identified himself only as the collector, offered a cryptic message. They took what they were told to take. They're smarter than you think. Look deeper, detective. Look closer to home. At first, Rachel dismissed the call as a prank, but something about the informant's tone lingered in her mind. It sounded like someone with inside knowledge, not just of the heist, but of the museum itself. The clue was subtle, but Rachel started thinking about who within the museum would have the authority to guide such a perfect crime. Who had both the access and the expertise to lead a team in such an audacious operation? The next night, she convened a meeting with her team, reviewing the list of staff members and curators who had worked on the Renaissance exhibit. Among them was Dr. Elizabeth Hale, the museum's head curator and the driving force behind the new exhibit. Dr. Hale was a brilliant scholar of Renaissance art, with a reputation for her meticulous approach to every exhibition. However, it wasn't just her academic expertise that caught Rachel's attention. Dr. Hale had been instrumental in arranging the private gala the night before the heist, an event that, unbeknownst to the guests, had been the perfect cover for the criminals to stake out their target. Rachel's suspicions grew as she dug deeper into Hale's personal history. Several years earlier, Hale had been involved in a controversial art acquisition deal that was never fully investigated. The deal had raised eyebrows in the art world, but no formal charges were ever brought against her. Now, Rachel wondered if there was a connection between that deal and the theft. Could Dr. Hale have been involved in something more sinister than just curating art? Could she be the mastermind behind the heist? With the walls closing in, Rachel knew she had to act quickly. The investigation had entered a critical phase. But there was a complication. The criminals were always one step ahead, and they had already started covering their tracks. Rachel's sources at auction houses reported that someone had attempted to sell La Luce on the black market, but the deal had fallen through at the last minute. Whoever was orchestrating the theft had made sure to dispose of the paintings before they could be easily traced. Time was running out. Rachel knew that the stolen pieces would not be kept hidden for long. The art world was too small, too interconnected for a $100 million theft to go unnoticed for long. She needed to put pressure on Dr. Hale and Reeves. Both had the knowledge and access needed to pull off such an operation, but the connection between them remained unclear. The investigation was at a crossroads. On one side, Rachel had the mounting evidence against Dr. Hale, a person with everything to gain from a heist of this magnitude. On the other, she had Alan Reeves, a loose end that had ties to both Hale and the museum's underworld dealings. But there was something still missing, a crucial link that would tie the thefts together and bring the criminals to justice. With only a few days to spare before the stolen pieces were likely sold or hidden for good, Rachel knew the next move would be the most dangerous one yet. But she had no choice. The heist, the perfect crime, had led her into a labyrinth of lies, secrets, and betrayal. And now, Rachel was ready to confront the mastermind behind it all, whoever that might be. The investigation into the Ridgewell Museum heist had reached a critical juncture. Detective Rachel Morales, after weeks of chasing down dead ends and obscure leads, had zeroed in on two potential suspects, Dr. Elizabeth Hale, the museum's esteemed head curator, and Alan Reeves, the former technician with ties to the museum's underworld dealings. Both had intimate knowledge of the museum's operations, and both had been in a position to orchestrate the heist. Yet the connection between them remained elusive, a piece of the puzzle that Rachel was determined to uncover. The missing artwork, valued at $100 million, had created a storm in the art world. While the stolen pieces, including Da Vinci's La Luce and Michelangelo's The Last Judgment, had yet to surface on the black market, the tension was mounting. In the world of rare art, it was impossible for such a theft to go unnoticed for long. Rachel's instinct told her that the criminals were not just after money, they were after something far more valuable: power. Dr. Hale's name had emerged as a key figure in the investigation, particularly after Rachel uncovered her involvement in a past art acquisition deal that had raised suspicions. Hale had connections to wealthy collectors and dealers with questionable reputations. Her expertise in Renaissance art made her the perfect candidate to stage a heist, but it wasn't just her knowledge that was concerning. Hale had arranged the private gala the night before the heist, providing the perfect cover for the criminals to familiarize themselves with the museum's layout and security protocols. It was a meticulous plan, one that would have required inside knowledge, and Hale had that knowledge in abundance. Yet, something didn't add up. Dr. Hale had no direct involvement in the black market. Her reputation in the academic world was impeccable, and Rachel struggled to reconcile the image of the refined curator with the cold, calculating mind of a thief. The possibility that Hale was merely a pawn in a larger game gnawed at Rachel, but she couldn't dismiss the mounting evidence. She needed to act quickly before Hale disappeared or, worse, destroyed the evidence. The breakthrough came when Rachel's team managed to trace a series of encrypted communications that linked Alan Reeves to a shadowy figure in the international art trade, a man known only by the alias The Broker. The Broker was a middleman who dealt exclusively in stolen art, facilitating transactions between thieves and underground buyers. It wasn't just a coincidence that Reeves had been in contact with him, it was clear that Reeves had knowledge of the heist from the start. But what was his role? Was he a mere courier, or was he more deeply involved? Rachel's suspicions began to crystallize when she discovered that Reeves had been spotted at the museum on the night of the heist. Surveillance footage, unavailable to the public, showed Reeves leaving the museum just hours before the blackout occurred. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. But what could he have been doing there? If he had orchestrated the theft, why hadn't he been caught on camera during the robbery itself? The missing link between Reeves and Hale still remained, but Rachel was beginning to form a theory: the heist had been a carefully planned collaboration. Reeves had the technical knowledge to disable the security systems, while Hale had the access to the artwork and the reputation to cover their tracks. The heist had been orchestrated in a way that played to both of their strengths. Each had a role to play, and each knew exactly how to cover for the other. It wasn't just a robbery, it was a masterpiece of deception. Rachel's investigation took a darker turn when she received an anonymous tip that led her to a private art auction scheduled for the following week. The tip suggested that La Luce, the missing Da Vinci, would be sold to the highest bidder. If the tip was accurate, this would be her chance to catch the thieves in the act. The auction was being held at a discreet location in the heart of Manhattan, far from the prying eyes of the public. Invitations were sent only to the wealthiest buyers and most influential collectors. Rachel knew this was her one shot to recover the stolen pieces and bring the criminals to justice. With a small team of trusted officers, she prepared for the operation. The stakes were higher than ever, and the risk was immense. If she failed, the stolen artwork would disappear into the black market forever, and the criminals would vanish without a trace. The night of the auction, Rachel and her team infiltrated the event, blending in with the crowd of elite art collectors and dealers. The atmosphere was opulent, filled with the hum of quiet conversations and the clinking of champagne glasses. As she scanned the room, Rachel's gaze fell on Dr. Hale, who had been invited as a special guest. The curator's presence confirmed her worst fear: Hale was deeply involved in the theft, and she was about to make a deal that would seal her fate. Rachel's pulse quickened. She had no doubt that Hale was expecting to sell the stolen artwork, but she needed concrete evidence. As the bidding commenced, Rachel kept a close eye on Hale, watching for any signs that would indicate she was about to make the transaction. In a corner of the room, Reeves was also present, speaking with a potential buyer. His calm demeanor suggested he knew the outcome of the auction before anyone else did. Then, as the auction reached its climax, the unmistakable sound of a phone buzzing cut through the room. Rachel turned just in time to see Hale discreetly slip a small package, presumably containing one of the stolen pieces, into the hands of a buyer. It was happening. The stolen artwork was about to change hands. Rachel moved swiftly, signaling her team to converge. The moment they approached Hale, the curator's face twisted in shock and fear. She had been caught red-handed, but she wasn't the only one involved. As Rachel arrested Hale, she noticed that Reeves was already slipping out the back door, attempting to flee. A chase ensued through the darkened alleyways of Manhattan, with Rachel in hot pursuit. Reeves was fast, but Rachel had spent years tracking down criminals, and she was not about to let him slip away. After a tense and harrowing chase, she cornered him near an abandoned warehouse. Reeves knew his time was up. He dropped to his knees, surrendering to the detective. With both Hale and Reeves in custody, the puzzle pieces finally began to fit. The stolen artwork was recovered, and the buyers, rich and influential as they were, would soon face charges. As Rachel stood over the recovered paintings, she realized that the heist had been more than just about art. It had been about power, control, and the underworld of high-value transactions. Hale and Reeves had been part of a larger, more dangerous network, one that extended far beyond the confines of the Ridgewell Museum. As the investigation came to a close, Rachel couldn't help but wonder how many more heists had been orchestrated in the shadows of the art world. How many other masterpieces had been stolen, hidden, or sold to the highest bidder? The criminals behind the Ridgewell Museum heist had been caught, but the true extent of their operation was still unknown. For Rachel, the case was a reminder that even in the world of art, nothing was ever truly as it seemed. The perfect crime had been unraveled, but the world of stolen art was far from finished.